Another edition here of Getting There with Gaz, where we talk about the career journeys of athletes, coaches, business owners, and more. Media members, upstate New York connections. Michael Kelly joining us right now. The Daily Gazette. Oh, and by the way, Jordan Kelly here loves his voice, right? JK said that quite possibly the best voice you've ever heard here on Getting There with Gaz. There's the expectations high at the start of this podcast. But for those who don't know you, Michael Kelly, let's go back to a younger version of you, 6, 7, 8 years old. Where'd you grow up? What did you want to be as a kid? And was it that same dream job you wanted when you were 18 years old?
Yeah, just to go back though, like Jordan Kelly is he doesn't probably know this is happening, obviously, but this is going to be, 30, 45 minutes of his favorite voice.
The Siena Saints basketball player, by the way, for those who are not in the capital region. That's right. Yeah. He's going to enjoy this. Just motivate him for seasons to come. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. So 6, 7, I'm from Clifton Park. So Clifton Park, New York. So, 45 minutes north of Albany for maybe people who are outside from the area. Grew up in Clifton Park, went to Shenandoah schools, played, basketball and baseball growing up, played basketball for the school. And then, headed off to, Stony Brook for college.
Now, wait, hang on a second. Shen basketball is good, man. Like, we're talking like a powerhouse. Like, are you telling me a younger Michael Kelly had some skills out on the hardwood?
I'm telling you that Shenandoah had a down year or two.
Now, I know you're pals with my buddy Brady Farkas, who your paths have crossed in the past. So both of you guys at some point were members, and I think you're 2 years older than Brady, but you guys were teammates at some point, right?
Yeah, so I would have been a senior and Brady would have been a sophomore that we would have played 1 year together. That would have been so my senior year would have been Tony DeZikas, who coached Shen for about 15 years, won the state title with Kevin Herter. My senior year would have been his first year. Probably one of the weaker additions of Tony's teams at Shenandoah was when he had the backup point guard who was like 5'5" and about 95 pounds and probably played a little too much.
I don't know if you're being honest or modest. We'll leave that for the mystery of the podcast. We'll have somebody else do the research and do their own reporter role for that. So when you're growing up in Clifton Park, did you want to be a sports reporter? Did you want to be a writer? Was it something else that you thought about might be your career path?
Yeah, I don't think I ever know is the short answer. I was one of those, I was pretty sure that I, at some point would hit like a 10-inch growth spurt and like would play in the NBA. Like I was pretty sure of that up until I was maybe 16 or 17 years old. I just figured naturally that's what would happen. I was always like more of like a math guy when I was a kid. So I figured just at some point it would be some type of career along those lines. Still am into like numbers and kind of incorporate that a lot into like what I do writing wise. But I don't even know if I totally understood that people were reporters. Never crossed my mind that was a career or possibility.
So even though it's never crossing your mind, by the time you become a senior at Shen, you do have to make a decision on what the next part of your life is going to be. Take us through the college career process. What were you looking at? Why were you applying to certain schools? And was there even a major in mind?
Yeah. So I originally was going to go to, this is going to be a long story. But
the perfect platform to do it on.
Yeah, this is gonna be like a 3-part story, and none of the parts have anything to do with each other. But the first one, just for fun, because there's people in my life who enjoy this, is I was going to be a physical therapist. I decided that as I think a junior in high school. I did not know what a physical therapist really did. And the fun part with that is I went to go look at a school for like their physical therapy program. And they were telling me about all the work you would have to do with cadavers. And I was just kind of like nodding along. I had no idea what a cadaver was. And when I found out, that was when I was like, well, physical therapy is obviously not going to be for me. But no, so I was going to go to school for math. I went to Stony Brook University to be, I think it was called like applied math and statistics, which is what you do to become an actuary. And, I remember I looked at 5 or 6 schools, didn't really probably take it as seriously as I should have, or as seriously as my parents would have enjoyed. Because I can't even tell you, I don't even remember what schools I applied to. But I kind of just through happenstance, I think I had a buddy who was going to Stony Brook. I had a friend's older brother who was there. Seemed like the right place to go to. Ended up there, and I think the math major lasted for less than half of a semester.
So it's not math. Why is it not math? You just hated it? It wasn't what you had hoped for?
So I got there and I realized pretty quickly, smartly, that I was a math major and taking math classes, and I was spending all my free time down at the college newspapers. I'd always liked writing, always had liked history, kind of like history, English. Like that was what I liked, even though it wasn't maybe necessarily what I was better at. And I think also just like once I was on my own and I was like, I'm just going to do this and, spend a lot of time in the newspapers. And Stony Brook at the time had just started their school of journalism. So I think I want to say maybe like the year before I got there. So it was also like kind of bright, shiny and new. And I just kind of, headed that way and kind of never stopped.
Bright, shiny, and new. Although Stony Brook is launching this new style of school, when you start thinking in the back of your mind, you're going to make this transition from math to becoming a writer or sports writer. Was there ever a thought of, hang on, I'm from upstate New York. I know there are other schools here across upstate New York, whether it be Syracuse, Oswego, Ithaca. If I'm changing what my focus is, I might need to change my school.
I don't think that. I think because that program was at the school, that it was a seamless transition for me. Like I think I definitely showed up at school one year, or freshman year, starting as one major, ended it as the other. And it was very effortless. I never considered like transferring, or never thought about like leaving to go anywhere else. I didn't test the portal. Because the portal, wasn't a thing at that time. Maybe if I'm in school now, maybe I'm jumping in after every semester to see what's out there, because that seems like the thing to do. But no, that school of journalism in Stony Brook was brand new and kind of stocked with a lot of really impressive, reporters and journalists. Primarily like from, if I remember, it would be from Newsday, which is a newspaper on Long Island. And then also they had a lot of people who were alums of like CBS News. So really cool program. And, was very happy with the way that things ended up working out, even if it wasn't super intentional on my part.
You are the first Stony Brook alumni to join Getting There with Gaz. So for those who are unfamiliar with Stony Brook now, or might be considering Stony Brook, what were some of those opportunities like for you as you worked your way up through those times working as a writer for the newspaper there at Stony Brook?
Yeah. So so besides the School of Journalism and kind of the formal part to it, which has a lot to offer, like internships there, they have really great relationships with the newspaper and the news and some of the news stations out there. So like everybody who goes through there, I would say gets like a pretty cool internship at some point. I interned at Newsday for a summer as a sports web editor. And which means that you're doing stuff with like Yankees Mets content for the whole time. Besides that, though, the thing that's really cool and really helped me while I was there is that they have a very vibrant, lively student media where there's like, I don't know exactly what the number's at now, but I think when I was there was like 6 or 7 different student outlets. It's not like monopolized by like one really large outlet that like everybody joins. There was 6 or 7. And so you really got opportunities to kind of do like a lot of different things. I remember I tell people that when I was at Stony Brook, at like my student reporting coverage wise was I covered the college basketball and I covered the school budget. So like very different things. And also like the fact that I was able to cover like school budgets, or a university budget, like really helped me later on, because, you never really get away from budgets and money, regardless of what subject you're reporting on.
Yeah. Finding out that different experience of how to develop a story, how to make those connections and all of those things art exciting way to watch your process build. So you're getting this experience. Stony Brook is helping you find the way in which you are feeling great about what your career could possibly be. So by the time senior year hits, they tell you have to leave campus. You have to graduate. You have to go. What is that job process like for you? Do you land a job in media fresh out of Stony Brook?
So I did. I actually had a job that I had to go work for a week and then come back to graduate, which makes it sound like I was like this person with a lot of options and obviously had a lot going on. I think I applied to something like 75 newspapers out of college. I think I got a total of 2 interviews. I remember I applied like everywhere. I remember at one point I applied like in one day to like, there was like 5 different small newspapers in the state of Oklahoma, and I applied to each of them, and Oklahoma was not interested in me. But I ended up it's kind of a funny story just with the way things work out kind of later for me, but I ended up working at the Recorder, which was and is a very small local newspaper in Amsterdam, New York. I'm right now sitting in Schenectady. Amsterdam's, up the river or down the river. I'm not really good with geography. It's along the river from here, another 15, 20 minutes. And so I started at that newspaper right out of college as a news reporter. A news reporter with like a promise to like maybe cover a sports game or two if it came up. But I think I covered the town of Amsterdam as well as like a couple like small villages or hamlets in that area, doing like town budgets and covering a lot of festivals and things of that nature.
Did you like it? Did you want to stick with that? Like, I guess we would call it not entertainment, but just news-based reporting.
Yeah. Also, I had done I kind of like in my origin story, it doesn't exist anymore because of how my career has gone. I did a lot of news work in college as well. It doesn't really factor in a ton all the time now since I've been pretty hardcore with sports for more than a decade. So I mostly, I think, looked at, I don't even remember, honestly, if I applied for sports reporter jobs out of college. I might have only applied for news reporter positions. But the long story long, I think I only did the news reporting for maybe 2 months before I had transitioned over to starting to do like exclusively sports work, which at a newspaper that size means like exclusively high school sports, some community sports. There was a summer baseball team that played out there. And that was how I spent like pretty much my first year in the business, was covering high school sports, this college baseball team. And trying to learn how not to make a lot of mistakes.
Was the team the Amsterdam Mohawks?
The Amsterdam Mohawks. Yeah, this was, this was like for people who know about the Amsterdam Mohawks, kind of like one of the better summer college baseball leagues in the country, honestly. And this was like pretty much like right when they first started to get like national recognition as like a top 20 program in the country. So that was a really cool experience. A lot of guys from like big time schools coming through there at that time.
Yeah, no doubt. For whether it's the New York Collegiate Baseball League, the Perfect Game Collegiate Baseball League, like they've had a lot of success. I think I don't want to overstep what we talked about there, that transition between covering festivals and covering news in Amsterdam to sports. How did that transition happen? Was it just a simple email call? What made that transition within a few months?
Yeah, so I'll have to think about that for a second. It was at the same paper. It was at the same place. I think somebody else got a new job. So there was a spot open. I was there. It was easy to slide me over. So I think that was really the extent of that. It was just, do you want to do it? I think also at that point too, I had been a news reporter for long enough to realize that it was not what I wanted to do full time. Just because, obviously, and I have a lot of respect for my colleagues and the people who do that type of work. It is not the most fun job. I think in like the 2 months that I did that, especially at a small newspaper, you're doing a lot of things like going to cover like accidents, fires, making calls to people who've, recently had family members die, and you need to confirm, kind of basic information about those people. So especially for a 22-year-old kid, if you're given the opportunity to do that, or you can go cover the baseball game, that choice is not difficult.
Take the baseball game, less stress.
Take the baseball game.
Yeah. Also, one other thing we want to make sure we don't pass by too quick. It is pretty remarkable that you being a Clifton Park native, you going to Stony Brook, landing that job post-college in a market that is basically, close to the hometown. It's not hours away or thousands of miles away. Was there like a situation where it was just that? Like, hey, I want to get back to New York? Because some people, like, that's their goal for 5-10 years post-graduation is getting back to their hometown. The fact that it happens that quick for you is pretty remarkable when you take a step back and look at it.
Yeah, and this is like a lot of things where I wish that there was a great plan or strategy to what I did, but mostly it's just that things have happened to work out for me. But no, I mean, that was because I applied everywhere. I mean, I would imagine, I never really asked. I would imagine I got the interview because, it had my hometown on it, and they knew that I was at least, they knew I was at least kind of knew the area, was local, would maybe take it more seriously. Because that's kind of the thing, especially with, kids, especially with journalists coming right out of college. You are told to do what I did. You apply to everywhere. And sometimes I don't know if you're a newspaper in Colorado, this kid from upstate New York, maybe he's not the most serious candidate because the job does not pay a ton of money, and is he going to move across country to do it? So I mean, I think just my proximity very much helped me at least get an interview. And then for me personally, it worked out great. I lived at home, I think, for the first year or two, commuted, and did kind of have some institutional knowledge just about how, especially with high school sports, just kind of how that worked in our area, in terms of what a Section 2 final, what does Section 2 mean? I knew that before I had started. And I think stuff like that, just kind of helps with a comfort level and helps you get going, and at least makes it that you're not making some of the more classic mistakes. You don't necessarily need to make them.
Yeah, that institutional knowledge is really a huge factor. On our visual side, we popped up a graphic that says sources, because if you're not from the capital region, if you're not from upstate New York, you may not know how to say Schenectady. If you're out towards Syracuse, Skinny Atlas, some of this stuff you just don't know because you're not from the area. And I mentioned sources here because you have a little bit of an advantage, or maybe even a big advantage, that you know who to call and where these stories are happening and how to get to these stories before someone who may not be from the area. Building sources, and this is still your occupation, so say as much or as little as you want about that. But did you find that working to your advantage of you knew where to go in comparison to people who didn't earlier in their career?
Sure. Early in my career, it was still, especially because it was so hyper local. I need to back up just because I was so impressed by how quickly and how efficiently. I know it's easier for you, but just the fact that you can say Skinny Atlas like that with no hesitation that's people. If people don't understand how that word is spelled and how it's said, they might not totally get it. It is not spelled Skinny Atlas.
A little advantage playing them in high school. Salve used to battle those Lakers out there. I won't even say it a second time so I don't jinx myself, but I have a little bit of an advantage on that one.
Yeah, well, if I were to say it a second time, it would definitely be something along the lines of Scantalese, because that is. I don't know if does it have an I in the spelling? It might not. Yeah,
no, it doesn't.
Yeah, Anyway, that's sorry for derailing this.
No, the high school people especially enjoy that reference with those guys having success. But
so a few years ago, random story, I'll tell it. A few years ago, we had the local high school football team that doesn't exist anymore, Holy Trinity. They played Skinny Atlas in maybe the state semi or the state final. I forget which round. And I had this idea of what would be a funny story is let's try to have these kids spell Skinny Atlas. I'm going to ask them if they can spell their opponent's name. And the first kid knocked it out of the park. And I was like, all right, you need to stay away from your teammates. And his teammates started, they were doing a relatively good job. The head coach of the team I think he just gave up 2 letters and it was like, can't do it, move on. So anyway, there was more time probably spent on Skinny Atlas on this podcast than you were expecting. But I have a lot of strong feelings about Skinny Atlas.
Once a businesses come in and start sponsoring this podcast, I will thank you and your check will be in the mail.
I'll do that read for free for you.
Okay.
In terms of, I mean, so I think your original question before I hijacked it was about building sources and if there's an advantage to having kind of local ties. Is that?
Yes.
Okay. So I think in my original job, I don't know if that existed so much because there is, especially at like the high school level, there's a big difference between being in Clifton Park and being in Amsterdam. They don't really cross over. So that was all pretty much new. I would say kind of in other things that I do, like especially more recently, just having local ties has helped a lot, especially as I've been more in kind of like the core capital region. There's people that I know who know other people who can tell them that I'm not an awful person. Or even just kind of in one of my like main walks of life, which is that I cover Siena basketball. I went to the same high school as Siena men's basketball coach, Carmen Massarello. We didn't go to school together or anything like that. But, I think right at the beginning, I think like he might've known, like my father, at least to like, say hello or something like that. So there was at least some familiarity there. I actually went to school with his sister. So I knew him through that. So there's different things like that where, being reporting within kind of like my local market, like there definitely are advantages in terms of knowing people and having people know you and having people be able to reach out kind of on your behalf to maybe get some things rolling. So I don't know how to quantify that. I probably would have to get somebody else here to compare against. But I mean, it's definitely an advantage. Definitely one of those things that kind of I alluded to earlier where has just kind of worked out for me without me trying to have a plan or a strategy.
That was well done. You basically didn't want to give away too many strategies of how well you do your job with other reporters, potentially locally, zooming through to the 22-minute mark. What does Michael Kelly do to get all these? Well done. You did exactly what you needed. Let's skip over
My
that.
advice would be to be born here. Yeah,
that's right. Daily Gazette. How did you get to the Daily Gazette? How did that transition happen?
Daily Gazette. So I worked at my first job, I think lasted for like 8 months or something like that. And since this is a career-centric show, I feel it's important to note that I was laid off. I lost my job within a year of getting it. That's a reality of this industry that happens. So I had that. I kind of bounced around. I worked at the Saratogian newspaper for a few months, ended up back in Amsterdam after a while as a different job opened up. And then, kind of building off what we were talking about before, I got to the Daily Gazette after I think I'd been reporting for about 5 years, had applied to the Daily Gazette pretty consistently for every single opening that they had. Had won like a bunch of awards throughout the state, which I thought was very impressive at the time. As it turns out, every journalist wins awards all the time. It's what we do as an industry. The Daily Gazette started a weekly newspaper in Clifton Park, New York, and they needed a sports reporter for it. So I was an awesome candidate for that job. So they started this weekly newspaper. They actually had started a couple weekly newspapers, one in Clifton Park, one in Niskayuna. And I don't even remember if I reached out or if they reached out to me. But obviously, had at that point had at least like a decent enough reputation in the area as a quality high school sports reporter. And then my resume probably still at that time said Clifton Park because I probably hadn't updated it to that I lived elsewhere. So I was a really natural fit for that role and kind of got rolling with that at a really awesome time in local sports in both Clifton Park and Niskayuna, because I think I started there at the end of 2014. And then like in the span of maybe 16 months, there's like multiple professional athletes coming out of those two schools. So really fertile territory to enter.
Entering at that point is a great time, as you just mentioned, to work locally in the capital region and cover it. Just to take a few steps back, because it is important for setting a timeline here, that early 2010 decade where you get laid off, you're looking for the next opportunity, you are seeing recognition for the content that you're creating. But for someone who, in comparison to others who might be in that field, is a fresh graduate from college, I'm sure there were times when you're trying to figure out the next step in your career where you're like, okay, I'm young, I see the business model of writing changing. And this is from a former radio guy who hosts a podcast now and does non-traditional media. So I hope you understand where I'm going with this, where it's like, okay, I could easily step aside and maybe do something else. Like I could run my own website and create sports content. I could work for a blog, which is far more popular in the early 2010s than maybe in comparison to 2022. But was there ever times during this process where you're looking for the next gig thinking, maybe it's not directly newspapers, but I have to find a way to expand what I'm doing to a different outlet?
Sure. Well, so I did have a NBA blog that probably still exists somewhere, that I did a lot of work with on my own, where I wrote about pretty much. I think that was during the time where I would have been laid off that I started that, and thought that maybe I'll just make it as an NBA blogger, because that's obviously an easy career path. I don't know though if I ever really considered like a total change. Pretty much when I got kicked out, it was like, how do I get back in? And I understood that meant like maybe doing some more work with video, kind of looking elsewhere again, kind of like around the country. But I mean, that's also one of those things where my career path again, to some degree, just kind of worked out. I went and I worked at the Saratogian, which is, again, in the capital region. It was 20 minutes north of my house. I went there and I did kind of like a part-time gig, did my blogging, did some other kind of like side jobs, until there was an opportunity to kind of get back in full-time. And that, I wish there was more of like a bootstraps quality to this story, but really I just kind of was lucky. I stuck around. I was patient. And when an opportunity was there, I was able to go get it. And then, kind of in the time since then, kind of make the most of, what was the second chance for me? Because otherwise, maybe I would have gone back to school eventually. I think I did look at that at one point of like, maybe, I have to just go back and do something totally different. I don't think that ever was very serious. Because I have no idea what that other thing would have been. Maybe I would have, gotten over the fear of cadavers and gone and be a physical therapist. But yeah, so I never really considered like alternative media beyond this blog that I tried to do. It was just about kind of how do I get, back, into the game.
And some of that may result of where you're from and the market you're working in, because in comparison to other upstate New York cities, we've seen newspaper outlets become just one media entity. Like in Syracuse, it was the Herald Journal and the Post Standard. You could look at markets like Utica and Watertown, that it became just one paper that was covering it, and maybe not even on a daily basis. But you, as a native of Clifton Park, in seeing what the capital region market was, you saw that there's the Daily Gazette, and we'll just say other competitors you didn't work for. I think that's the best way we'll sum that up. When you are going through this process, and I'm talking like now being an employee of the Daily Gazette, did you find the capital region that there is competition and that makes that industry better? When someone is pushing you to get a different story, a different interview, a different quote, some would argue it's saturated or oversaturated, but you get to see it firsthand. Do you find that the capital region, and you in particular, have success because there are a lot of people covering these stories locally?
Yeah, I mean, I think there has to be that, right? I mean, I think from a newspaper side of things, obviously at the Daily Gazette, the top competition is the Albany Times-Union. Our sports departments overlap a good deal in terms of kind of like core coverage areas and things we care about. And I think that competition, kind of drives both sides. You cannot be lazy. because if you worked in a area with kind of only one significant outlet and something happened on a Tuesday, maybe you could wait till a Friday for it. In the capital region, because of there are still a variety of newspapers. The TV stations have a great sports presence. The radio station has a good sports presence. So there is still kind of that daily competition to be first, but also to have interesting stories. And I think that makes kind of this region, this market, especially for a market of our size, I think that makes it semi-unique. I think if you go to most places in the country, kind of a market our size, maybe there isn't, such a robust media presence in terms of diversity of outlets. And I think that's a really cool thing about our area, and does drive, like a lot of, I won't even say competition, but I would say a lot of good coverage, because there is that drive, that you get from having competitors.
So when you're in college, look, you work in a media setting now. From the mid 2000s to the early 2020s, a lot of things have changed. Like reporters back in the 90s might have had to post their column and been done. But now you're looked at for potentially how many articles you're writing per week, what the interaction is, the engagement, and everything else. When you're creating this content for the Daily Gazette, do you look at what you're posting and be like, okay, this is a little bit more difficult, even though it's changed from what I thought it is, I'm still finding success doing it with this, as you mentioned, competitive field, better content. Do you find your writings better from maybe what it was going to be 15 years ago if you were a professional sports reporter in 2008 or 2010?
Sure. I mean, better. I don't know if it would be better or worse. It's different. And also kind of what the priorities are. To go back, I'm not like a real newspaper veteran yet by this point. But when I started at newspapers, which would be 2010, at that point, we uploaded our website once a day. And I think, at least in the early years of Twitter, I had bosses who did not want me to tweet stuff out because we needed to save it for the not like a breaking news scoop necessarily. Even it was just like kind of like scores. Like, don't put that out. We're going to put that in the newspaper. So that was that was a couple of years into my career, and I'm not that far into my career. So, in terms of, again, I don't know if better or worse, because everything is, kind of relative, but the medium is a lot different, in terms of just how you release information and kind of what you need to prioritize. I'm thinking about, are we able to reveal the curtain on like when we're taping right now? Or?
Yeah, for sure.
All right. So this is Friday afternoon. And I have to be careful to not reveal too much, but we have a breaking news situation today with Union College hockey, which I believe they're going to have a press conference later this afternoon. I believe during the course of while we've been talking, I believe they've put out a press release about a coach. But we also had reported that we found that out earlier in the day. We found that out in the morning. We kind of knew about it last night. We were trying to get some things confirmed because, yes, they're going to confirm it at noon, and there's going to be this press conference at 4, theoretically, hypothetically. But, we need to get that story online immediately as like a small stub at 8, 9, 10 a.m., whenever we can. Whereas if we were to go back, I think even like 10, 12 years ago at a outlet the size of the Daily Gazette, we would just be like, we're just working on this for tomorrow's paper. We're not going to worry about getting anything out earlier. There isn't really a need to, because, the website exists, but it's not totally functional on a minute to minute, kind of status like it is now. So I think, again, I think we have not even had a press conference yet to announce what's being announced today. And I think we've already had 3 separate stories on our website, or 3 different versions of it. So I think that kind of gives a glimpse into how that gig has changed, where this would not have even happened 10 years ago. And now we've had multiple pieces of content already today. And there's still going to have to be kind of a larger, bigger piece for the newspaper. So luckily it's not me writing that story today. I'm thrilled because I'm here talking instead. Ken Schott, one of my colleagues here at the Daily Gazette, he's off somewhere working really hard. and I'm here.
I'm glad you have the reporter writer instincts, because some people might have picked up how I kind of like coded that question, and you and I being very similar in age, you figured it out. Like, okay, in the past, someone would have been like, hey, don't put this on the website. This is going in the paper, or we want eyeballs to go to this rather than that. And now the history may have told us maybe some of this stuff should have been behind a paywall so we can make money. Now, you figured out the code. Very good. Thank you. And revealed a lot of stuff that was better than the question I actually asked, which is good. I know you're busy, so I got 2 more questions for you. And I know that's a journalism faux pas of saying how many questions you got left. So I'll take my.
Seems like we have at least 6.
That's right. When you are doing interviews, best strategy, whether it be an athlete, a coach, have you developed a strategy that you feel like you can offer up to a young journalist right now that has had success for you in your career?
Sure. I assume that we're talking about kind of like in a one-on-one setting.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I think so. The top thing is to know what you're talking about, and to both kind of know your subject, know the topic, but also to maybe kind of understand what the subject is, going to think or feel about what you're going to ask them about, especially if like things are, maybe more of a feature, more of a sensitive topic, kind of anticipating, what's not assuming, but kind of having like studied anticipation of, where things might head, is really important. I think it's really good also to, some people look at them as like softball questions. But at the beginning, I think you really want to feel somebody out, and also kind of give somebody a chance to explain themselves. Especially when I interview somebody for the first time, I think my first several questions are always about, where the person's from. I always, even if somebody's, let's say they're a head coach of a basketball team, I ask them just kind of like describe to me like what their job is like. Because they might view what their profession is, or, kind of what they're, whatever you're interviewing about, they might view it a lot differently than you view it. So I always think, especially early in interviews, you want to try to meet people on their level, see where they are, see what they're thinking. And that really helps you tailor then kind of things as you move forward. Because, rather than having 2 conversations, you can have 1 conversation.
If there's a young student, whether it's at Shen, your alma mater, it's Stony Brook, wherever it might be across the Capital Region or upstate New York, I know you've offered some of it already, but the best advice to get where you are, if somebody wants to be a sports writer, they want to follow a team, they want to get paid to do what you're doing, what's the best advice to get where Michael Kelly is right now?
Which visually right now, I don't know if that's desirable, as I'm just here in a, I guess there's a phone over there to add some color. This is the quietest room at the Daily Gazette.
Zoom background would have had you on a beach with a fruity drink.
Yeah. This is where you want to get to. Like, all right. I always tell people, and it's not like the most interesting advice, but I always tell people just to read as much as they can, and to learn as much as you can, basically. I think sometimes, especially as as people are, seeking jobs or seeking opportunities, or trying to figure out, where they want to get to, they forget that, like, if they do get there, they are going to have to actually do the job. They're going to have to know a lot of stuff. So I always just tell people to read, as much as possible, consume as much information as possible. It doesn't necessarily have to be read, but just consume as much information as possible. Just because then you start to see how things connect, and, as long as you're, kind of being like a lifelong learner, I feel like, there's always opportunities that are going to present themselves, and that way you have the ability to, to perhaps take advantage of it, is if you have kind of that base of knowledge, that background of knowledge. That I think, sometimes we get away from as we, are grinding and, really working hard to get to where we want to go.
It is a busy time in the Capital Region. You are a busy guy. We finally were able to do this. I squeezed it in perfectly on a Friday when news broke right before you've got to take off and do your job. Mike Kelly, thank you so much for doing this. Looking forward to bumping into you some events here at the Capital Region very soon, and we'll be talking again real soon.
All right. This was a lot of fun. Thanks for having me on.